about next directions. But I thought what was fascinating about yesterday's discussion was the shift in, and I think, Mark, Perna, I have to give you credit. I'm stealing some of your words, so forgive me. Yeah, I'll buy you a drink later. But the discussion was about shifting the paradigm. And it's really begin to talk about, we're too siloed in our education and workforce system. And so career development has become very siloed. It isn't about whether it's CTE, whether it's 2-year, 4-year certificate. We keep talking in these silos rather than really beginning to talk about, how do we help individuals get the information and the guidance they need to create their own pathway. And as was talked about also in the sessions, is that those pathways are changing, because the world of work, and especially because the technology is changing. And, so we need to get out of the thoughts about the niches and think about the student, not about how it's presented, but about the student. And I thought that shift was, and it's maybe a nuance because it's certainly happening somewhere, was really fascinating, and I love that. And also the focus on human skills. And I like that term. We talk about personal skills, employability skills, soft skills. I like the whole term of human skills, and that regardless of what pathway you're going through, regardless of how many jobs you're in, every individual needs to have those human skills that are applied to a job that is constantly going to be changing. And so I thought to me, it was very exciting to hear that, and to have industry, education, policy leaders from the national level really talking and engaged in that kind of dialogue sets the stage for the work that this Coalition for Career Development Center can do to take advantage of what's out there, but really begin to explore new ways of looking at how do we move forward, and how do we look at things somewhat differently. How do we help individuals to begin to chart their own path? And you get these messages pop up on your screen while you're doing it, and it throws me off sometimes. Sorry. Spencer, would you do me a favor? Ron's having trouble with the link, so send it to him again.
Sure. Yeah, look at that. He's coming right on. He's coming right on.
Okay, thank you. The staff just sent me a note. So, so today we're going to continue that discussion. Hello, Mr. Painter. And we're going to continue that discussion with, we have 2 dynamite panels that are looking at it from sort of that collective area of how do we change. Yes, it's about policy, but how do we change the development, the organization of what we're doing? And I'm so excited about the first panel. And then we're going to also look at the whole issue of equity and diversity, which is critical to, and it was brought up yesterday, critical what we're talking about. And then finally leading into what information do we need? What research do we need to conduct? What is being done now? How do we collect it? How do we move forward on that? So I'm just thrilled with all of you back here today. And I encourage you to use the chat box with any comments, with any questions that you have. And I am actually going to, Ron, have you start a little early, because I am so excited about this first panel. I want you to have more time. And so we'll keep you on time, but have more time. So it's really my pleasure to introduce, I mean, this panel, they're all good friends, to introduce Ron Painter, who is the Executive Director for the National Association of Workforce Boards. And I'm going to let Ron introduce the panel, but this is going to be an interesting panel looking at it from how do we drive from the national level? How do we drive it? Bring in the states into that discussion. What needs to begin to change to create a new roadmap for career development? So, Mr. Painter, good morning. No, it's good afternoon. Sorry, it's still morning.
I think it's good morning where you are, right?
Where I am, it is. So it's all
Denver,
yours,
Colorado. But I am here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It is afternoon. Thanks, Jan, and good to see everybody. I see Sam Bottom here, and that's great, because if there's somebody I know that could use career development help, no. Now this is a great panel. I am really excited. Oh, Brian Albrecht's here also. Like, oh, we have the answers. We have the answers here today. We have a great panel coming up. A couple of these folks I have known a while. It is a treat to get an opportunity to chat with them. Kim Green and I have known each other a while. One of the things the pandemic has robbed us of is the ability to hang out and have coffee. And I sorely miss that, Kim, but it's great to have you here. Let me introduce the panel. First of all, Lauren Fairley, and I hope I said that right, Lauren, is here. She is from the Department of Labor's Office of Workforce Investment. Great to have you joining us. Appreciate the department. Kim Green is the Executive Director of Advanced CTE, and Amanda Winters is the Program Director, Postsecondary at the National Governors Association. So I think you can all see we've got three people who really do understand this issue and can help the conversation. Let me kick it off, and I'm just going to ask each of you to spend a couple of minutes. Most of us probably are familiar with you or the organization, but if you can just give us like that 30,000 foot view in a way that I would understand, Kim. So you really have to dumb this down. So I get this, but Lauren, tell us a little bit about what all is in the Workforce Investment Office of DOL.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. And my panelists may not be so familiar with me, but I'm sure that you're familiar with Pam Frugally, who I work with, and we've worked together for 13 years on ONET and Career One Stop. So she gave me the opportunity to come and talk today, and I'm absolutely thrilled because she knows that career advising is my passion. So I'm thrilled to be here today, but to talk to you a little bit about Employment and Training Administration and their mission. Our primary goal is to provide high quality job training, employment and labor market information. And we run the American Job Centers that are across the nation. So we provide the funding and the resources, technical assistance to American Job Centers. All of that comes out of ETA. My specific division is the Division of National Programs, Tools, and Technical Assistance. Try saying that really fast. And specifically, I'm in the E-Tools unit. I'm the Federal Project Officer for ONET and Career One Stop. And those are things that I'm sure that many are familiar with. Those are tools that have been around for some time. And ONET being the world's most comprehensive occupational database, Career One Stop is like a virtual American Job Center that has a ton of resources in it. It's a very comprehensive tool for all types of job seekers, youth, career counselors, re-entry, individuals that are looking to re-enter the workforce. So all of those tools come out of my unit. In my other life, I am an adjunct professor at University of Maryland Global Campus. I used to be University of Maryland University College. I began teaching courses in career planning there in 2006. So when I first started, we had mainly face-to-face courses, and I was armed with my PowerPoint, a couple of little assessments, and of course, the Department of Labor tools. And things have just progressed over the last 15 years. I'm so excited about all of the new technology that helps to, teach career planning a lot easier. So I'm absolutely thrilled to talk about, some of the technical advances that I've seen over the years. I'm out of the first year experience program there for students, and I teach a career exploration course, mainly to freshmen. It's a mandatory course that they take, and it's about connecting students not only to or expanding their knowledge base on careers, but also connecting them to degrees and programs. And we also work a lot to help them self-assess during that first year. And then the other course that I teach is career planning, where we actually work on developing a career plan. So again, all of that's in my other life. So I have 2 lives. So I'm thrilled to be here. I hope that gives you a sense of why I'm here and why it's important for me to be here. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And Lauren, we're going to come back in that first question, because I think the department's done a lot of work. By the way, I'm a big fan of a lot of your coworkers. You have some great people over there, Kim and Robin and Pam and a whole crew. So good stuff. But we're going to come back because I think this sense that you have given us around what you guys have done, what the department's done, your unit in particular over the last few years. Want to come back and talk about certainly the role of the feds and the role of tech. But let me move to Amanda Winters, National Governors Association. Like, I think most of us have probably heard about governors, but you got a whole unit inside NGA around post-secondary. Talk about like what the scope of that work is for you all.
Yeah, definitely excited to be here. And unlike Lauren, I do not have the energy for 2 lives. I just have the one and can barely hold that together sometimes. So this is actually my first day back in the office in 14 months. Yay. So it feels bizarre. I'll just let you guys know who haven't.
And the plants are dead, right?
Like everything, like I know it looks like a hostage video behind me because there's no pictures or pretty things on the wall. So forgive the blandness behind me. I'm dealing with my essentially feeling like I'm working from a model home right now. But excited to tell you all about some of the work we're doing at the National Governors Association and to interact with my valued colleagues on this panel about some of these overarching issues. So for those of you who are not familiar with the National Governors Association, we are the Association for Governors, no big surprise there, but we have sort of 2 different functions. It's really 2 organizations in one. We have one that's really the association that really deals with sort of connecting to the Hill and doing advocacy and communication. And then we have the Center for Best Practices, which is the technical assistance and consultative arm of the National Governors Association. So that's where I live, and that's where a lot of our policy experts live. We deal with policies all the way across the whole education and workforce continuum, but also in energy and in health and in transportation and in criminal justice. So anything that you'd have a governor's advisor for, we have a space within our center that helps to support and speak to the policies that are priorities for your governors. So,
and I think that's the interesting point, Amanda. Most of us, I jokingly said, most of us know what a governor is, but I don't think people realize that NGA, anything that the governor, like advisory boards that sit at the governor's office, questions of policy the governor may have, or one of his staff or her staff have, you guys deal with a lot more than just what we might think a governor does. Which is
definitely
handsomely with legislators, right?
Well, of course. I mean, that's the primary relationship. Now, we won't talk about that contention in this conversation, but I
think it's important, right? Because
it definitely is.
They like the president, they set an agenda, right. And a lot of that is discussed with you guys.
Yeah, and we have the privilege of supporting the governors in all of these conversations, which a lot are which I think is what we're going to talk about here. A lot of this is cross agencies and across sort of streams of work, and it's intersectional, and so provides us really cool opportunities to dive into some of the issues. I specifically this morning was talking with the state around racial equity and education opportunities. So really those intersection points between critical areas of priority for governors across the political spectrum. So I'm excited to be able to talk about this really broad topic we have today around career development and career readiness, which has a lot of meanings for governors and for state level work. So very excited to be able to join you all. I've been in the DC area about 3.5 years doing this work. Prior to that was at a SHIO agency and at a university doing some work around advising. So this really falls into my wheelhouse and my area of passion. So thanks for the opportunity to join the conversation today.
Great to have you. Kim Green, my coffee buddy, my policy kumbaya. Hey, great to have you here. You are the executive director of Advanced CTE. Talk a little bit about Advanced CTE. Name change a few years ago. Mission the same. This is a sweet spot, right?
Yeah, well, it's delightful to be here. I want to say thanks to Jan and Leo for their leadership in getting the coalition started. And I have the honor of serving on the board of the coalition. So delighted to be here, both from that perspective, but also for this panel, despite the moderator. So, well, Advanced CTE, yes, I've been with our organization for 28 years now. So I've gone from the youngest person at the table to now I've been called the historian, which is just hard to believe. But our organization, you asked in the question kind of to share a tidbit that people might not know, our organization is actually in its 101st year. So we've been around since the federal government started investing in what was then called vocational education. Actually, before the federal government started investing in education writ large or workforce development, it was investing in vocational education. And we represent state career and technical education directors in all 50 states, the US territories, and the District of Columbia. Our members' responsibilities span CTE all the way back to upper elementary school through middle school, high school, workforce development, community college programs. And our main kind of charge, and I think where Ron and I intersect, is we support our members by doing federal advocacy work, we do state policy work and technical assistance, and we also work to try to lift up replicable best practices and research. We also, I think, and I've always tried to kind of run our organization as a model of what we want to see in states. And so we really try to be an organization that is known for not promoting the status quo, but for charging ahead and creating new pathways through bold leadership, and specifically and recently really making sure that we're forward-leaning, fiercely committed to equity and quality, and collaborative in the creation and execution of measurable and impactful results. Recently, one way we've done that is that we've put out a shared vision for the future of CTE that is called CTE Without Limits, and it's organized around 5 principles, and CCD Coalition is one of the signers onto that, that vision. And the goal of that vision includes a deep commitment to career development, career navigation that is really centered and driven by learners. So I hope that wasn't too policy wonky and more plain spoken, Ron. You're muted, Ron.
Oh, sorry. It was fine. It was fine, Kim. And I will give a public shout out and a thanks to you. I think I really appreciate our conversations, because I think this connection between the workforce development boards, WIOA, and what is happening in CTE. I heard it yesterday from a local board talking about we've got to build a better bridge between what's happening in the PK through 12 system, what a young person may know and come to learn, and then where do they go from there? We've got to do a better job. So, I appreciate everything. Let me come back and ask. One of the questions I want to ask is your opinion, and I'm going to start with you, Kim. So, anytime we do this around education issues, workforce issues, there are 3 levels of people involved in this. Locals, whether that's local organizations or local electeds. We've got states involved in this. We got the feds in this. With regard to career development, what do you see as the roles of each of those levels?
Well, 2 of your panelists work for organizations that are from states. So of course, we're going to say the states should be leading this work. But I will kind of go quickly through my opinion about each level. I mean, I do think there's a role for the federal government. I think there's a role for the federal government, not only in this issue, but broader issues around being the backstop for equity and making sure that across the country, we've got kind of comparable investment and equitable access to high quality programs, including career development programs. I think a shared goal of the federal government and states is to create what I'm going to call kind of moonshot goals, right? So like what's the catalyst to see transformative change and to create investments to help move us forward in a not significant way, I think is an appropriate role for the federal government. I also think the federal government has, and there's a duality of this, of creating guardrails, but also removing barriers. So, right, so sometimes those guardrails become barriers. And I think it's kind of being very nimble, which is not something the federal government does well, of trying to find that balance. And the last piece I would say, and again, I think this is a role for the federal government and states, is around accountability and collecting data. So I think the accountability lies within states, but I think the ability to collect data and investing in data, given the portability and mobility of learners and workers and work, should happen with the federal government. I'll just say quickly so as not to take kind of the whole list away, but I do think the determination of quality stays with states. And I think states have a responsibility of ensuring quality and consistency within their systems. And I think importantly at the local level, this is where relationships are built. Not to say the states don't do this, but the locals need to be building relationships with employers. It's where the colleges and K-12 educators are building deep-rooted relationships. And they know what the needs are in their communities. And so I think those relationships get built at the local level, and that's where innovation is incubated, and the states have the responsibility to scale that innovation. So those are a few of my thoughts.
Cool. I certainly appreciate those thoughts. I think one of the things that I have said is that while we can name the assets in Washington, D.C., we know what those assets are. How they play out at the local level where it's actually got to be done, and the trust has got to be built. With that, I'm going to come to you, Amanda. I see you nodding. I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask the same question. What do you see as the role for, you're in the middle here, what do you see as the role for the feds? What do you see as what your expectations at the local level are?
Well, it's going to be no surprise, already based on what Kim had said, that I'm going to be like, states. Go states when talking about moving some of this work forward, but there's certainly definite roles for everybody. So I would say, but focus in on the states and then look at the feds and the locals from there. I think a lot of the things, I would echo a lot of the things that Kim was sharing. I think states have a unique opportunity to provide definitions and alignment, as well as as data considerations, because of course you got to measure what you're defining and what you're prioritizing. But as I mentioned in my opening remarks, this topic lives in different spaces at both the federal and state and the local level. So I have a tendency to speak about like states, but as like they're a monolith. But within the state, you've got your departments of labor and commerce, and you've got your licensure and certification agencies, and you've got your departments of higher ed and your departments of education, and maybe your community college system. So you've got lots of folks around a table talking about what career development means. And you got to all start, got to make sure you're rowing the boat in the same direction. And that's a critical role that governors play, but also their advisors and their agency leads of, how are we going to do this together, and the shared understanding of the direction we're moving in, and also making sure that you're leveraging your industry assets across all of this work in ways that make sense for the whole continuum. So I think that there's sort of that alignment and definitional piece, the vision piece of where we're all going together and who is playing what role as part of the state in this work. But then also thinking about the federal government, totally agree with Kim here in that sort of backstop for equity and the ways in which monies are distributed to states and then to localities, like thinking about investment that makes sense and parameters around gathering evidence and really, proving outcomes for students and value for students. I think there's a strong state and federal connection there around the conversation around quality, but would also agree that that quality conversations need to happen at states, and they have ownership of those sort of being the gatekeeper of we want lots of options for students and lots of great options, but we want quality options for them. And that's where the state comes in, is making sure that those options that come into their, their constellation of opportunity are all quality options, and they can go in lots of different directions, knowing that somebody's, some agency has been a safeguard for them to make sure that these are good, will have good outcomes for them. And then at the local level, I would just throw in that, the connections, the clear connections between regional economies and the growth of some of these conversations around what local employers need, local employers value in the way of certifications and skills, is sort of the coloring inside of the lines that, the states draw the lines, and then the local areas figure out what that looks like for us. And what do our industries need, and what do our students need, what do our learners need? And so I think also the state has an obligation to listen to their local areas and their regions about what they need and where investment would best serve students, and how the state can direct their priorities to move and scale and move some of these programs forward that are really proven to serve students well. So that's my continuum.
I'm gonna come back, Amanda, and ask you more about the notion of quality. As I mentioned, when I'm not in DC, I sit here in the Commonwealth. Having worked for the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, we all know there's Pittsburgh, there's Philly, and I guess there's other parts. But I want to talk about the role of the governor in places like Pennsylvania. We have two big metro areas, and then you've got a lot of else. You got a lot of work to do. Lauren, you are here answering totally for the federal government. No, I'm just, I mean, Department of Labor, because you do inside the Department of Labor, the American Job Centers, but people also forget Job Corps, Youth Build, seasonal and migrant farm workers, Native American programs. Career development is critical to the work that happens. What do you see as the role of the department? You guys have been very active. You're muted. Sorry.
I absolutely agree with the other panelists and everything they said. So I could just say, yeah, what they said. But I am going to say, I think that the role of the federal government is to support, assist, believe it or not, break down some of those silos and barriers. I think when people think federal government, you don't think about it as a place where silos and barriers and things are broken down. But I absolutely think that that's a role that we can play and that we do play in some instances, where we can provide technical assistance, connect states with other states, connect local areas with other areas, provide them guidance on how to implement policies. So, I do think there's some role that the federal government should play and can play in making things easier for states and local areas to learn about other best practices and kind of provide an opportunity to share information at all levels. So I do believe that's a role that we play. The example that I can give is with WIOA, right? We've spent, since 2014, we've spent quite a bit of time and resources just trying to provide the technical assistance to all levels of government to implement the change that happened with WIOA. And so I think that that's absolutely a role that the federal government should play, and that's to support and to help and provide resources. As far as the state and local levels of government, again, I would only say, reiterate what was said before, that they should engage, they should communicate, they should share what their needs are, so that we can properly, provide the support and the technical assistance that helps to break down maybe challenges and silos and barriers. And I think that maybe is the only thing that I feel is different than what was said earlier.
So these cross-departmental conversations, Lauren, I'm going to ask you the rhetorical question. There are conversations, a lot of conversation with the Department of Education,
Yes.
and you all in workforce investment. But let me come back and talk about, you mentioned, and I will, you know, I will say, we always point out what we wish was better, but ONET is the world standard. As I talk to my colleagues around the globe, ONET is something that everybody understands. We all talk about ONET. But let me ask you, the department's been very active. We talked about you know, the technology that you're bringing. What's the thought process around you know, touching on career development? What's the thought process around what drives the technology development in the department?
You know, we have an innovation officer, and I think that, you know, the idea about, you know, I'm not sure that our department or where we are in ETA, that we have necessarily all the expertise that we need to keep up with the pace of um, technological advances, right? So when you talk about ONET, you know, we've been doing things, um, you know, the same for a pretty good period of time, and we always like to look at how we can improve the data collection, make it more nimble, make it more responsive to the pace of the industries, and that's difficult with. You know, the bureaucracy that supports data collection. So I think, you know, some of the drivers that we consider, not only with ONET, but with Career One Stop too, is looking for a way that we can, you know, partner with, you know, private sector to look at how we might, you know, improve and stay in pace with the technology and the growth. An example of that is Career One Stop, you know, is partnering with Google in some cases on certain projects. ONET, you know, of course, has a data collection process, but they've also looked at ways by partnering with Burning Glass to you know, make things a little more responsive to industry change. So by using real-time labor market information to enhance the data in ONET, you know, that's something that we've done over the years. So we do definitely consider, you know, this private and public partnership as an important, you know, tool in trying to, you know, keep up with the pace of technology. Other things that we've discussed, artificial intelligence, working with, again, organizations that can help us to implement, you know, some baby steps, I would say, and trying to make that happen. One of the things about both of our tools, ONET and Career One Stop, is that we don't have user accounts. So we really don't have the ability to provide like an individualized experience on our tools. You know, it's more of a grand population experience, but we're definitely, you know, thinking about ways of you know, implementing a more individualized experience, and that would involve using AI. So, you know, we're doing things to make sure that we stay in pace, but it can be a little challenging, you know, with the bureaucracy that supports electronic tools and DOL.
That's a great point, a great segue, because I want to come back and talk about what do you see as some of the struggles as we think about you know, career development, as we think about career advising. I'm going to jump, Kim, to you and ask, you know, Lauren identified things like, and I mean, ONET is an anchor. ONET's an anchor for so much of what we do. But what do you see as some of the struggles out of these three layers of you know, involvement in career development?
And I think one thing that you mentioned earlier was, you know, you and I, the work that we do of trying to build this bridge between education and labor. I mean, the Department of Education is one side of the mall, Department of Labor is the other side of the mall. We've had presidential memos, right, but there's still this, if we kind of polled the whole entire federal government, we know there are training programs in almost every federal agency. There are ways to help people get to those training programs in almost every federal agency. So like we still have work to do in terms of collaboration at the federal level and collaboration at the state level. And I think the reason that that is so important to continue the efforting around that collaboration is the user experience. It's that learner, it's the worker who's trying to find things. I will give an example. My brother-in-law who started college, didn't finish, went into IT, has no industry certifications despite my prodding and prompting, but has no industry certifications. And kind of at 45 decided I don't want to do this anymore. So I tried to help him actually get logged in to register at Montgomery County Community College to say, let's talk to a career coach and help you think about how your skills can be transferred into another industry. I've been in this field, as I said, 28 years. I could not figure out how to get him an appointment with a career coach at the college. And then I was like, and English is my first language, and I am educated, right? So like, we have lots of barriers we need to remove to get people access to the information in the way that they need it, where and when they need it. So I think that's a kind of significant barrier. I'm going to say kind of put it in the like struggle bucket, but I am encouraged by this. And it's something actually Lauren said is increasing kind of collaboration between government and private sector, because I think that the work to make this kind of exponentially leap forward requires that collaboration. I was just on a conversation the other day with someone who's created this platform that is aggregating non-credit courses offered by community colleges across the country. And it's kind of like an Amazon marketplace. I'm interested in something. Oh, I can get this course no matter where I live. And it's going to show me what I need and what credential options this is moving me on. Like, to me, the technology interface with this is a key part of the solution of making career development accessible and current and forward-looking, but that requires that public-private collaboration. So, I mean, I think the last thing that I would just say, I actually was listening to a podcast the other day with Rich Feller, who's done a lot of work in the career development space, and he was saying the career development system, and I've not really ever heard anybody say this, yes, in CTE, we know we need to change based on the needs of industry because we're reflective, we're teaching what industry's teaching. But I've not really actually heard of anybody saying, well, career development needs to transform on that similar cycle, like every 20 years. We need to be thinking about how we're helping people think about and navigate into and through the world of work as the world of work changes. And I was like, it was just kind of this light bulb moment for me of like, well, yeah, of course, that same cycle, we need to be having the career navigation systems changing. And I don't know that I think people have viewed the systems as a little more static. So those are a few thoughts.
A couple of really good observations. Amanda, what do you see as the struggles around career development in these layers?
Yeah, I'm going to steal the term struggle bucket, and I'm going to set out some struggle buckets for you right now. A couple of them are tied to data and information. So when I'm talking to states around data collection, there's sort of a knee-jerk reaction to like put a bunch of information together and put it on a dashboard and put it out online, and then they're like, and now we've shared information with people that people can find and then use. You think, okay, well, that's not necessary. Who's using it? And inevitably, the people using it or looking at it are people like us who are like, oh, look at this cool dashboard for this state, not necessarily learners. So there's really this sort of disconnect around the idea of information and data and what that means to users and what's really like the right kind of things to put out there and how best can we have them use it, but then also data needed for policy making. It's a whole, like, it's a different sort of group of pieces of data, but I think the data conversation has to be inclusive of both. Like, what is going to be pulled out for users? What do we need to understand as helping policymakers make some of these investment and programmatic decisions? It's different pieces of the data world. And I think we can sort of either move in one or the other directions and forget the other, and have less impact with the data that we're pulling together. And also connected to that user space, counselors and advisors at K-12 and workforce agencies, and also at higher ed, we throw a lot on their plate. Like, well, we'll just have counselors, tell them all about all the things that they can do. So now every counselor needs to know about all of these different career pathways and all the credentials that exist. Literally impossible at a lot of colleges or schools' current staffing rate, and how many folks that they have to actually advise people and all the things we expect them to know. We also expect these.
I think that's a great point. I don't mean to interrupt, Amanda, but I think it does get back to my question earlier. I don't know about the 50 states, but in the Commonwealth, you know, the state is supposed to provide a certain level of funding across the board to local school districts, and there are 501, I believe, in the Commonwealth. Kim's nodding. I think that's right. We're second only to like Illinois, maybe, or something. But so how does the state deal with these issues of quality, this issue of what you're saying to a career guidance counselor, the numbers they have? I saw a few years ago the ratio in Philly, which was like crazy. It was like 600 to 1. So what's the role of the state in trying to look at looking at this, not trying, but looking at this issue? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, I think there has to be a realistic conversation about all the things we're expecting of the folks who take on these roles. They're also expected to help with assessment testing and mental health counseling and basic needs referrals, and all that we're expecting them to be career and life advisors and essentially social workers at the same time. So much is put onto this this group of folks within our different systems. I would say advisors and counselors within these different systems, we're all not investing in them enough. And there is evidence out there, when you invest in more advisors, you get better outcomes for the things you're trying to do, because you have more touch points for those students who need support or would benefit from this type of guidance. So, I can make these blanket statements, but there needs to be more investment in advisors and counselors at all of these points, so that there's informed professionals who are learning, who are doing that learning and that developing that Kim mentioned around, career development. They're able to adapt and change and learn about the data that's out there, so that they can help learners curate that for themselves. So they can help give them the agency to figure out what's next. But if we don't have enough of those folks, then that information sits out there, and learners who could be benefiting from it don't make that connection. So I think oftentimes states put their investment into these tools, which many of them are cool and super interesting and usable and have great information. But the disconnect between the learners who need to use these and those tools is one that I think has to be bridged by these professionals who live in this counseling and advising space. So they're a critical connection piece that I think many times does not get enough recognition or investment within the career development conversation.
Ron, can I pick up on that? Because I want to say, if the solution was have a robust technology platform and require high school graduation plans, we wouldn't have a problem anymore, because everybody's done that a bazillion times. But I think we have seen some states trying to recognizing the value of that counselor. And while we certainly would be advocates for more school counselors, I do think there are some innovations that are happening in states that are investing in career navigators and career coaches, that we're seeing collaboration between secondary and post-secondary systems that are using kind of people in the advisement personnel space to support learners. We even see in CTE, and so the challenge is, if you can get into CTE, your instructor in CTE essentially becomes your guide, right? The problem is the gateway to get into CTE or not. I mean, then you stay with your CTE instructor for 2-3 years. They become a family friend and a mentor, and invested in you. But it's kind of that gatekeeper. And so I think what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people try to kind of legislate policies around this, and to support Amanda, it really is an investment issue, not just a policy solution.
So both of you are pointing out something. Lauren, I'm gonna come back to you. I saw you nodding. You actually are a counselor. You actually do this. Is there a need for us at the federal level to do a better job of, I don't know whether you want to call it professional development, or more time connecting to the people who actually sit at that desk? Let's pretend we're all at desks. Sit at that desk to do the counseling. How do you bridge that gap? Because you are producing some technology tools, to Amanda's point. You are, the Department of Education is. So how do we close that gap, that knowledge gap? You're on mute.
I guess that's why I've been nodding and shaking my head. I'm like jumping out of my seat, because that's what's missing. Like, even in our electronic tools, we are missing coaches, right? So we can add all of these wonderful widgets and tools and things to ONET and to Career One Stop, but we can't replace the person. We can't replace the coach, right? That helps the user navigate not only the tools, but make it so that it's a longer term experience. So I think what's missing, and I think there's a place for us to try to figure out, how do we help, the coaching piece of it. So we have our career advisors in the American Job Center, and we provide technical assistance that supports them. And, we do webinars on how to utilize all of our tools. So, we're giving them the resources. But what is the way to encourage the coaching piece? That's huge, because it is a long-term process. It doesn't end. Like, the user will come to our site, they'll spend a little time, they may go away, a couple weeks later they may come back, but there's nothing that ties together their experiences and helps them get to an end goal. It's like we're putting that responsibility on them. And I don't think that every job seeker is able to get to that endpoint or plan a way to get to that endpoint unless that person has a coach or has an advisor. So, that's, I don't know how to, or what the solution is at the federal level. It would be one thing to say, yes, invest in more advisors and try to help that along the way, especially now, with the pandemic. We have, we're putting out grants to states. That could be one thing that we could say, is that, to hire more coaches, hire people that will, help individuals navigate their way back into the workforce. That's one way we might solve that problem, but it's a longer term issue. It's not a one-time shot. So yes, absolutely coaching. I think the other piece of it is, and this is what Janet and I were talking about earlier, before the call started. So bureaucracy hampers a lot of what we do, at the federal level, and specifically the standard occupational classification process. That's a 10-year. There's a 10-year gap before we consider new occupations and changes within industries. So I think there's definitely opportunity there at the federal level for us to, ask, why does it take 10 years? Between, times when we will recognize new occupations, that's just doesn't keep up with the pace of the change of industries. So, there's opportunity at the federal level for us to, look at coaching. Absolutely. How do we help with coaching in person and online? And then, how we can get rid of some of these the bureaucratic barriers that make things difficult.
I know you can't say it, Lauren, but I'm allowed to say that I think this is where having a conversation with your congressional legislative delegation is really important, to help them understand that there is this gap and they have a real opportunity to help close that gap, whether it's in WIOA, whether it's in Perkins, whether it's in ESSA, whether it's in HEA, they have an opportunity, but first they have to understand that that gap is there. I think really part of also what we need are real tech wizards like me and Jan Bray, spending more time out there coaching the system. I want to come back and
that'll screw up the system big time. We don't have to worry about anything, man.
You all don't get to see Jan and I on our staff calls, but it can be interesting at moments. Hey, I do want to come back and I want to ask. I'm going to start off, Amanda. I'm going to ask you. And I joked about Sam earlier, but we should all live so long that we would have incredible partners like Snap-on, businesses that not only talk about these issues but walk the talk, commit themselves, commit their organizations to advancing career development and workforce development. But Amanda, what can business do? I'm the governor. What is it you're going to suggest to me I ask of business in this regard?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of work actually that's happened with governors around engaging industry. First of all, we have some, the high profile conversations like in Washington with their tech partners and Arkansas with Walmart. We have these big employers who come to the table and model industry collaborations. But I'm always there to say, this is great, and this can really bring some focus to a topic. But the heart and soul of a lot of this career development stuff is at the regional level. It's with our small and medium-sized employers. It's with things that are driving our regional economies. So governors certainly should set the table for clear opportunities for public-private partnerships at the regional level to advance this work. But also some of these concrete investments that have been made. Work-based learning is a huge push for governors across, a couple, like 30 states I know have like clear investments in work-based learning opportunities across the continuum, which I think is really important too. We see, of course, apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships being a big push, and it's like, let's get apprenticeships for everybody. And then we have pre-apprenticeships that are becoming sort of in vogue right now for younger populations. But then also going all the way back into the K-12 setting and thinking about just career exposure opportunities, learning about different fields, maybe doing a visit to a local employer, maybe, spending a day doing job shadowing, maybe doing an internship or a project-based opportunity with a local employer. There's a lot of really concrete ways in which employers can be connected to education and workforce opportunities. And there's a lot of desire on their part for them to engage and mentor and support young talent coming through the pipeline. It just has to be done in a coordinated way so that the same employer isn't getting, I know we hear this when we talk to regional folks all the time, like the same employer gets outreach from 5 different places to do things with the school, and they're just like, I can't do all this stuff, but they're willing to do things if we sort of come together on the state and local side and say, how are we going to engage employers? So work-based learning, I think, is a huge opportunity. There's platforms for employers to be engaged in meaningful ways for their work. But then also a lot of states are thinking about sort of, what are some, tax incentives for you taking on interns or building your apprenticeship programs, or, how can we incentivize in a really concrete, like in the most literal term of incentivize you to engage more closely with our education and training systems in ways that you can really see an immediate value add for your business. So I think the ROI conversation that we make to businesses as an easy one. We just have to get in there and make it. And I think states can play a great role in that communication. Also, I think state workforce boards have clear opportunity to sort of set the stage at the state level around how businesses are going to be engaged around sector partnerships at the state level, how we're going to talk about skills and credentials throughout our state systems around different sectors. So I think the state has some opportunities to sort of outreach and incentivize, but also to put some sort of meaningful frameworks around different sector work that's happening throughout some of our, I know CTE leaders in states are doing this in, in this great way that connects secondary and post-secondary. Workforce should also be a part of that conversation, along with adult basic education, like these places that we can connect so that we're speaking the same language around the sectors. So when we're talking to our industry partners, we're all talking about the same levers that we can pull and the same sorts of competencies that exist in these different sector training opportunities. So those are the things I would throw out. There's lots of opportunities for connection though.
Let me ask you guys, we're bumping up against time, but really quick, we all agree that we need to do a better job of helping people, not just young people, but people develop a career pathway. If you had to suggest one measure of that we're making progress, what would it be? Lauren, how do we know we're getting better?
Well, that is research, looking at, conducting more research, looking at outcomes and impact, right? That's how you're gonna know that you have, made some impact in an area. Data sharing, I think these are all good investments,
Are we going to see completion rates rise if we do a better job around career counseling? Are we going to see completion rates rise in community colleges, post-secondary, in technical education programs, if we're doing a good job of counseling?
Right, that's what I would say. It's that, and then you have to be able to measure that impact, and measuring impact takes a lot longer, right? So it's not a super responsive, you're not, you might be able to measure outcomes quickly, but the impact is what takes longer. So, but I definitely think, doing the research, understanding how to evaluate what we're doing, evaluate our programs better, and looking at the impact of things, that's how we'll know that we've, made a difference. Cool. In what we're doing.
All right, Kim, let me give you time to answer that.
Plus one on completion. I think the other thing we talked about is learners being centered. So we have an opportunity and responsibility to talk to learners and find out how they feel, some sort of like learner satisfaction measure, that both of them are looking at closing gaps, so that we're making sure that we are closing gaps that exist by race, gender, and income level.
Awesome. My thanks to Lauren Fairley, Amanda Winters, and Kimberly Green for joining in the conversation. My thanks, Leo, to you and to Brian for your leadership, and to Jan and Spencer for the opportunity to spend time with you all today. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Good conversation. We need to keep it going.
I agree with your last statement, especially, Ron. We need to keep the conversation going. That was a great panel. Lauren, Kimberly, Amanda, Ron, thank you. That was really, I always feel bad when panels have to end because you really want to engage and talk more. So we'll find other ways to do it. So I really appreciate it. And as they've been talking and we can